How's it going, everyone? James Lynch here, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, I'm going to be looking at the UFC 283 welterweight fight between Gilbert Burns and Neil Magny. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Love this fight. Two notable names in the division: Burns, Magny, 3 rounds, welterweight main card fight. It's going to be a good one. Got to give Magny props here. He wanted this fight. He ended up getting it. He's going to Brazil again. He's actually gone to Brazil a few times to fight a Brazilian. So all the power to him. And for Gilbert Burns, again, I know he's favored in this fight, but it's going to be an interesting one. We'll dig right into it. If you haven't watched the show before, I basically go through a bunch of stats on both fighters, and then I give my pick at the end. And some of it might be relevant, it might not, but that's kind of the way I like looking at things, is looking at every little angle I can. Let's start first with Gilbert Burns, the number 5th ranked welterweight. We'll start with him. So you can see there, Gilbert Burns is 20-5. He's got 6 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 6 decisions. He's 36 years old. He's 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. He's a 3-time world champion and world gold medalist in grappling. He's a 3rd-degree BJJ black belt, and he trains at Kill Cliff MMA. He's got performance of the night 4 times with his wins over Christos Giagos, Alex Oliveira, Damian Maia, and Tyron Woodley. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Khamzat Chimaev. Gilbert Burns made his amateur debut way back in April of 2000. In July of 2011. Made his MMA debut in January of 2012. Interesting little tidbit here, even though Burns is older, Magny, by the time Gilbert Burns made his MMA debut here in January of 2012, Neil Magny already had 7 fights. So it's kind of interesting, Magny having more experience. Gilbert Burns made his UFC debut in July of 2014. Look at it there. Whoops, went past it. July of 2014, and he ended up getting my things here. He fought Andreas Stahl, and that was a fight that actually took place at welterweight. You can see there, what was I trying to say? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. That's what happens. So he made his UFC debut in July of 2014. Neil Magny already had 6 UFC fights at that point, just something to keep in mind. Some notable wins for Burns throughout his career. Gunnar Nelson, I remember that being a pretty notable win. That was when he had made the move back up to welterweight, just a fight previously, or a couple fights previously, I should say. Then got the knockout win over Damian Maia. That was a huge win there. Maia, I think it only been knocked out. I think maybe Nate Marquardt knocked him out, but there hasn't been many knockout losses for Damian Maia. So that was a big win, and that sort of prompted him to get the big fight against Tyron Woodley, which is another good win he got. He won a decision in that one, and then he got not most recently, 2 fights ago, he got a win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a fight where he looked great, and Thompson had no answers, basically out-wrestled him most of the fight. Burns has had a couple notable losses, as we've seen here. I might as well just mention all of his losses. Rashid Magomedov, Michel Prazeres, Dan Hooker. These were all losses at lightweight. Dan Hooker still the only fighter to finish Gilbert Burns at lightweight, which is interesting. And then ended up losing to Kamaru Usman as well, just the second man to knock out Gilbert Burns. That was at UFC 258. That was a title fight, the former teammates going at it. And then most recently, he lost a decision to Khamzat Chimaev in a fight that I think he proved a lot of people wrong. A lot of people were expecting Khamzat Chimaev to run right through Gilbert Burns, and Burns held his own and even gave us a pretty close fight in that one, even though Chimaev did end up getting the nod on that one. As far as layoffs, Gilbert Burns is not at a ton. You look at it here, going from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to Khamzat Chimaev, there's a 273-day layoff. And then going from Chimaev to Neil Magny, there will be a 443-day layoff. He was kind of in a weird spot after losing to Chimaev anyways, because who's he going to fight? I know he tried to get a fight with Masvidal. That didn't end up panning out. So instead, he ends up with Neil Magny. Now, Burns has had a few injuries and things of that nature, things that we got to point out here. So if you go all the way back here, Gilbert Burns was supposed to fight Norman Park back in May of 2015. He had an injury in that fight. He was replaced by Francisco Trinaldo in that fight. Then he was supposed to fight Paul Felder. That was back in February of 2011, had an injury there. No word on what that injury was. Then he was supposed to fight Olivier Aubin-Mercier. You remember this? This was really weird. I think people forget about this. Again, this was at lightweight, so it doesn't really have any impact on this fight because it's 170, but this was UFC on Fox 28. Burns deemed too heavy to attempt a weight cut, and I think they said the same thing with Olivier as well. They were both pulled from the card. I'm reading here. It says a promotional medical team deemed Burns would be unsafe to meet the lightweight upper limit of 156. So it's interesting. I mean, he fights at 170 now, not an issue, but just one thing to sort of point out there. And on that note, Gilbert Burns has fought 14 times at lightweight. He's fought 2 catchweight fights, one at 160 and one at 158, where his opponent missed weight. And he's fought 7 times at welterweight. This fight against Neil Magny will be his 8th fight at welterweight. Yeah, that's everything you need to know about Gilbert Burns. Obviously, has knockout power, has a good ground game, as we've seen with his accolades outside of the cage. But yeah, Gilbert Burns, always an exciting fighter to watch. Let's talk about his opponent, Neil Magny. Time of recording this, I'm supposed to interview Neil this week, so keep your eye out for that. Neil Magny, 27-9. Tons of fights. It's crazy. He's got 36 fights overall. That's insane. He's got 7 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 16 decisions. He's the number 12th ranked welterweight. Neil Magny is 35 years old. I think people forget that they're pretty close in age, him and Gilbert Burns. He's 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. So Neil Magny is going to be 1 year younger. He's going to have a 5-inch height and 9-inch reach advantage in this fight. So we'll see if that pays off. Although Neil, one of the bigger fighters in that weight class, he's a BJJ brown belt and he trains at an Elevation Fight Team. Now check out some of the other accolades for Neil Magny here. He's tied with Roger Huerta, Kevin Holland for the most wins in a calendar year with 5 wins in 2014. He has the most decision wins in UFC history at 13. He has the most decision wins in UFC welterweight history at 13. He's got the most wins in UFC welterweight history. Not even George St. Pierre has, actually, sorry. It says that he's has most wins in UFC welterweight history at 20. He tied George St. Pierre, Kamaru Usman, and Frankie Edgar for second most unanimous decision wins in UFC history. So he holds the record for UFC welterweight wins, and he also has the most decision wins in UFC history with 10. He has the most decision bouts in welterweight history with 15. He has the longest fight time in UFC welterweight history with 5 hours, 58 minutes, and 19 seconds. He's got fight of the night 1 time against Calvin Gastelum. He's got performance of the night 4 times against Kichi Kuchimono, Hai Gun Lim, remember him? That guy was a knockout artist. Hector Lombard and Daniel Rodriguez. Neil Magny did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros in August of 2010. Made his UFC debut back in February 13. He was on The Ultimate Fighter, beat Frank Camacho, which is crazy looking back now, Cameron Diffley, Bristol Morunde, and then lost to Mike Ricci. Was knocked out in that fight, but did have a successful UFC debut, beating John Manley, then lost 2 straight, and then check this win streak he went on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight wins after that. So again, you lose a couple fights doesn't mean you can't turn things around. Neil Magny is proof of this. Like I said, started his career 1-2, went on a 7-fight win streak. He's 20-8 in the UFC. He's got 7 stoppage victories. Some notable wins for Neil Magny include Kelvin Gastelum, Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, Li Jingliang, Robbie Lawler, Jeff Neal, Max Griffin, and most recently, Daniel Rodriguez, submitting him in the 3rd round. He's got some notable losses as well, though. Lorenz Larkin knocked him out in the 1st round. Bellator standout. Rafael dos Anjos submitting him in the 1st round. Santiago Ponzinibbio finishing him in the 4th round, back when Pons was healthy and looked like he was a contender in that weight class. And then Chiesa lost a decision there and then got absolutely destroyed by Shavkat Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov, an absolute killer in that weight class. Yeah, it looked like 2 completely different fighters competing against each other. Rakhmonov had his number from the opening bell. Neil Magny's had a few layoffs. If you look here, going from, actually just had 1 major layoff, going from Ponzinibbio to Li Jingliang. He's had a 476-day layoff. He was supposed to fight Vicente Luque, but he was flagged by USADA. There was some issue there. It wasn't like him like trying to cheat the system. I think it was one of those like over-the-counter things that took him outside of that. So yeah, that was one sort of note there as far as why he had the layoff. Neil Magny's had a number of close fights here. We're going to go through them right now. When he fought Seth Baginski at Fight for the Troops back in actually his 2nd UFC fight, I think, right? 3rd UFC fight. So he lost that fight by decision. If you look at the scorecards for that, that was back in November of 2013. 5 scoring it for Seth. 1 scoring it a draw, 6 scoring it for Neil Magny. So people felt like Magny should have won that fight. Then his fight against Alex Garcia. That was back at UFC Fight Night 49 in August of 2014. 5 media members scoring the fight for Magny, 5 scoring it for Garcia. Calvin Gastelum. Where are we here? Calvin Gastelum. Right here, split decision win. UFC Fight Night 78, November 2015. 4 media members scoring the fight for Magny, 10 scoring it a draw, 1 scoring it for Gastelum. So the majority feeling like that fight should have been a draw. Johnny Hendricks, unanimous decision there. UFC 207, December 2016. 20 media members scoring the fight for Magny. 3 actually scored it for Johnny Hendricks, interestingly enough. Rocco Martin, another close fight. UFC 250, Nunes Spencer, June 2020. 5 media members scoring the fight for Magny, 10 scoring it for Rocco. So that could have been a loss there. And then Max Griffin, another close fight there. That was back in March of this year. Split decision win there. 15 media members scoring the fight for Magny, 3 scoring it for Griffin. So again, we mentioned the decision record. Some of those could have gone either way, right? This fight we do not have odds for. This is part of the UFC 283 card. The only odds we have at the time of recording this are the main event. I would imagine Gilbert Burns is going to be a favorite. If I had to guess, probably 2-1, possibly, no, probably 2-1, maybe even, I don't think it'll be 3-1, probably 2-1 if I had to guess here. I think Burns will be the favorite if you just look at the opposition and the fact that Magny always seems to get like these, key fights like Chiesa and RDA, and he ends up losing them. So I think that's part of it too. My pick in this fight is going to be Gilbert Burns. Magny is, like I said, a little bit younger. He'll be bigger, but I don't know where he beats Gilbert Burns here. That's the thing. I know Magny's done a good job with guys like Lawler, and even in the D-Rod fight, D-Rod's got some serious power. He's able to sort of neutralize him a little bit. Magny gets hit a bit. Burns can crack. He can absolutely crack, although we have not seen Burns get a knockout win, I think, since Maya, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Maya was the last knockout win. Like, even though he's had a lot of knockouts in his career, he hasn't had a ton at 170. So I don't think he's going to go out there and like blitz Magny and finish him in the first round in that fight. So I don't think that happens. He could submit Magny, although you have to go all the way back to when was Burns' last submission win. It's been a bit. Mike Davis, 2019, it was a second round submission in that one. And that I think was at lightweight. Yeah, it was. So he was a little bit bigger in that fight. He's not going to have that advantage over Neil Magny in this one. What I think is most likely in this fight is Burns ends up winning a decision here. I don't think Magny's going to finish Burns like he did against Daniel Rodriguez. I mean, that fight with Rodriguez was close enough. And, I think if Magny had not finished, who knows how that fight would have gone on the scorecards. I think with Burns, he's pretty solid overall. Burns has had, he lost to Chimaev. A lot of guys are losing to Chimaev in that weight class. Here's another thing, sort of another clue for us here. Shavkat Rakhmonov, very dominant fighter in the weight class, destroyed Magny. And it kind of showed that Magny's not a contender at this point. I think he's sort of in that mid-range. I think Burns is still a contender. Again, Thompson win was good. He lost to Usman, but even in that fight, he cracked Usman early on. Very good fighter. Woodley was a dominant win. Maya on his way out, but still knocked him out in that fight. Yeah, I just think Burns is better on paper, and I think he goes out there and proves that. So again, I think decision here for Burns because it's 3 rounds. Magny either loses early or he loses a decision. I tend to lean more decision here only because Burns is not like a first round finisher, like typically, right? Like again, Maya was a first round finish, but that's not really typical of Gilbert Burns in his career. I think Burns goes out there, lands the better power shots, wins the striking battle, and I think on the ground he can hold his own as well. I'm going Burns decision in this fight. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking in this fight? Do you think Neil Magny can pull this one off? Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. While you're there, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. If there's any other fights you want me to preview on Early Look, just let me know in the comments. And if you want to discuss this fight, more than happy to do that. Maybe I missed something. Maybe you agree with me on something. Maybe you don't. I'd love to hear from you as we're breaking down this fight even further. So there we go. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.